Hello, everyone. My name is Koshi Nakanishi, director of Resident Evil 7. Thanks for being here, but I can't speak English.
You speak English now.
So, here's Peter.
Thank you very much, Koshi. My name is Pete Fabiano. Some of you may know me as the guy who doesn't do ADR. Others in the room will know me as Pete Fabiano, Senior Manager of Global R&D. My team and I handled a bit of the production for this project. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. Today we're here to discuss, well, I'm here speaking on Koshi's behalf to discuss the vision and approach we took with RE7. So as most of you are aware, Resident Evil is known as Biohazard in Japan. So for this title, we consolidated the names and made the Western name Resident Evil a subtitle in Japan and vice versa overseas. Internally, we nicknamed the project Harawata, which roughly translates as entrails or guts. It also happens to be, however, part of the name for Evil Dead in Japanese. So, quick show of hands. Who in the room has actually played Resident Evil 7 in some form or another? Wow, oh wait, me too. Okay, well then most of you know what we're getting into. For this series, we took a new direction, in part by changing the camera to first person and keeping a strong focus on survival horror. And we're not just saying that, we did actually try to do that. I'd like to start by playing a brief clip to help set the stage and visually demonstrate what we accomplished.
What the fuck? What is that? What the fuck are you talking about?
So we weren't really sure how all this would be received. As developers, we wanted to keep true to our creative vision, but how would fans and the public respond? Overall, we were pretty pleased with the public reception from industry, media, and customer feedback. Players were happy with the overall direction we took, and we got positive commentary on the atmosphere and the world that we tried to create. So let's go back to the beginning, where it all started. Osaka, 2014. So how do you iterate on the RE franchise? Well, you get two seasoned RE veterans, Jun Takeuchi and Koshi to my left here, who would ultimately act as executive producer, that's Jun Takeuchi, and of course the director here, Koshi. This is when we first discussed the new direction and started early stages in building the team. So Takeuchi delivered his general vision for the title. I mean, how are we going to take the brand forward? The answer? Horror. Yeah. Sure, could you be a bit more specific? Yeah, so here we have the 4 mandates that he established. Tone along the lines of Evil Dead, first-person perspective to keep players more immersed, and we coupled that with photorealism to give it more of a realistic feeling. And no co-op. He felt that we should keep the experience more personal and thus make it single player. And finally, references to past characters, etc., should be kept to a minimum or subdued. If you're into horror, then I'm sure you're familiar with Evil Dead. So what did we extrapolate from that film? Well, first off, we wanted to keep the number of characters to a minimum. We settled on about 5 main villains. We knew that we were going up against other AAA blockbuster titles, so we needed to be efficient in our approach in order to keep budgets in check and still maintain a high level of interest and quality. We kept the feeling of confinement by limiting a majority of the game to an old home. This helped us to keep set pieces narrow and feeling semi-claustrophobic. In addition, this all contributed to the way players would approach the game and help capture the mood. You can think of the RE series almost as a series of trilogies. 1 and 3 had fixed cameras and gameplay, and that created a feeling of helplessness or challenge to keep players scared or anxious. 4 through 6 changed focus to third person, and they gave us new types of enemies to match the new direction in gameplay. Now with 7, we wanted to keep the tradition of adapting certain elements and direction to make things feel fresh. 2 major components in this approach were photorealism and first person. As we mentioned, our focus was to be on the player experience, and in this case, one that focused on horror. To accomplish this, we brought the game back to single player and moved away from familiar series characters. In order to concentrate on the horror aspect, we needed to keep the scope of the game somewhat narrow. We didn't want an expansive playing field or to have too much clutter around the single player experience. The team agreed that we needed to keep away from a focus on the main characters. In other words, we didn't want this to turn into a game driven by the protagonist's story per se, but more so on the player experience itself. So going back to Takeuchi for a moment, he gave us a very simple vision for the project. Make the game scary and fun. Really?
Seriously?
So yeah, something tells me Koshi wasn't quite as cavalier when he heard the news. But he thought to himself, no way, you're going to let me run with just that? But he was certainly up for the challenge. Truth be told, this wasn't something that came about spur of the moment. As a company, we had been throwing around ideas as to where to take the franchise. This came after careful consideration, especially regarding the next phase in the franchise life cycle. Koshi himself had been doing some soul searching. He knew we needed to redefine the brand. And now we had the general direction that we needed to take, and he got now finally the ability to take it there. With that in mind, we had to go over brand identity. What makes Resident Evil Resident Evil? I mean, how do you describe the game to people? For us, it was fun, atmospheric, scary. We needed to make sure, though, that RE differentiated itself from competitors. So staying true to our newly defined vision, we set out to begin planning and designing and putting together a design document in order to reach our end goal. Probably the most important focal point was attempting to achieve the same impact or feeling that players had the first time they picked up and played the original RE, particularly the first one, and its iconic atmosphere and imagery. So what did we have in the original RE that defined it? Well, you had unfamiliar surroundings. Where were you? Everything you encountered was new, and neither you nor the characters knew what was going on. Interesting enemies. Everyone remembers the first time you see the camera pan to what appears to be a zombie, and it turns towards you. Were you fighting with the undead? Players didn't know who they were. Sure, you heard the stars' names, but the characters weren't that developed. They were new, and you didn't know who to trust. Would you ever even make it out of this place alive? You'll notice the goal here was to tie in a lot of unknowns. Who, what, where, how. All this contributes to giving off feelings of anxiety and ultimately fear. For the new direction, we wanted to create that same sense, or create a sense of unknown. So we chose a new setting in Louisiana, with an unfamiliar main character and a new mystery. The sense of new and unknown continues with our enemy design. With photorealism, our characters could display vivid expressions. We could have them perform unexpected and grotesque actions. And this leads to psychologically taxing situations, a sort of psychological roller coaster. Not knowing what to expect kept situations tense and players often trying to keep their guards up and sometimes failing. With RE, level designs focused on enclosed areas where you collect ammo and solve puzzles, all with the intention of opening up new areas and moving forward. This was accomplished with either linear, or what we call tube-style design, or through more Metroidvania-like progression. We kept this for RE7 as well. Welcome to the family, everyone. Since we wanted to keep to 4 or 5 main villains, the less is more approach, we thought a good way to bring it all together would be to make them a family. Now we had some of the general ingredients we needed, so we needed to review some of the issues we felt existed with making a horror game. One of the main problems we discovered is that people get used to being scared pretty quickly, especially if you can guess what's coming. We thought that in RE, players overcame their fears by laying waste to enemies. This is the catharsis point. Once the unfamiliar grows, and then it becomes familiar or common, people adapt and learn how to overcome their fears. So we decided to shake things up a little bit. We incorporated elements of the horror subgenres into each of the family members. There's a multitude of categories here, so without going into too many details, we can say that Margaret, or the mother character, for her, we took elements of body or natural horror. Limbs exaggerate as she mutates. Centipedes emerge from her body. With Jack, the father character, we included elements of slasher films. Lucas, a slice from psychological horror, and so on and so forth. We still needed to overcome our perceived issues with horror, though. And the easiest, or simplest, at least in terms of theory, not execution, was immersion. How do we make players feel like they're in this world or situation? We already mentioned first person and photorealism, but adding to that, we wanted to have a level of believability, while limiting the characterization around the main character. And of course, one final piece to the immersion puzzle was to include VR. So what are some of the things we actively removed or chose to avoid? To keep our overall vision of scary and fun while staying true to the defined RE identity, we felt that we needed to exclude familiar characters, action elements, co-op, zombies, any type of over-the-top blockbuster type film. Including these would run counter to our goals, or at the very best, make them difficult to achieve. Now we are finally starting to get closer to actually building something. We got our direction, our ideas, our definitions, but what do fans like about the series? So over our 20 years with the franchise, we've gotten feedback that tells us that what the fans have liked across the timeline. You've got characters, story, a sense of fear, foreboding, puzzles, taking down enemies, particularly in co-op, zombies, creatures, all of the stuff that comes with RE, and fixed cameras. But not all fans are created equal. And most importantly, you can't have it all. So here's something Koshi believed about creating or building a commercial product, complete with visual references of what you get when you pack everything together. As you can see, making something no one hates means also making something that no one loves. You'll remember potentially that Simpsons episode where Homer made a car for the everyman, and it ended up being for everyone and no one at the same time. Here's a little bit more philosophy. Deciding what to do means also deciding what not to do. And so with that, we completed our game design doc and moved forward. Which takes us to presenting that to the guys seated in the front row, maybe. Marketing, yeah. So how did they respond? Well, all companies and publisher-developer relationships are different. Some are contentious, some are friendly. For us, when we presented it to them, we didn't get much pushback. However, it was very easy to come up with reasons for failure or risk. This was especially true as we were going through the approval process. From our perspective, marketing liked our design and direction. Their major concern was determining where the brand fit into the market. After all, we were trying to make something old but new. Lucky for our devs, however, our chairman, Big T, lover of baseball, puts a lot of trust into our teams. He truly believes that they're capable of making something good and encourages them to do so. He didn't actually say that. No, he did. How did the team react, though? I think that's a point that we need to explore. Well, we took a lot of criticism to heart. We knew we needed to appeal to our base, so we needed to look more into the details of our approach. We wanted to have something as fresh and memorable as the Christopher Nolan Batman films. However, the important point to consider is that we didn't want to reboot the series. We wanted to move it forward in its next natural stage. So following through with our aims, we broke down our targets and wanted to ensure that we were making something that our fans would be happy with. It's all theory and data, but at least it helped us to create goals and move towards them. One of our other goals became moving towards action via gameplay rather than the shooting mechanics. But there are already some great games out there that are scary. Again, we needed to differentiate ourselves. We needed what the Japanese refer to as the fifth sense of taste, the umami. So Koshi asked the teams to write up some mock reviews. What would people say about our title? Here's a general summary of what they wrote. Excuse me for a moment. Resident Evil 7 trades the massive scale and unrivaled variety of the previous installments for a return to the magic of the original Resident Evil. Though the game's theme and plotline hint at classic RE tropes, RE7 has largely discarded its ongoing virus-centric story and familiar characters, which might be a disappointment to some fans. However, the development team should be commended for meeting and exceeding the high expectations of the current market, and we were left with high hopes for the future of the series. So they were trying to predict the future and be hopeful. And with that, we finally started building. We had to get in the right mindset. We couldn't make something scary without feeling or knowing fear ourselves. So like it or not, he and the team set out to find urban legends, watch horror films, head to haunted mansions, etc., etc. Koshi heard that the Uncharted team, though, they got to go to a desert while making their game. We only got to drive 30 minutes to an abandoned location nearby. Something tells me we got the short end of the stick. Except he forgot that we actually got to go to Louisiana and film quite a bunch of stuff for reference. We got some wonderful stuff out there. We got to travel to plantations, to museums, to all sorts of locations that really helped to capture some of the realism that we were going for. Except that I think he forgot about that because, unfortunately, he was at home building the game. Anyway, while doing all of this, something happened. Some team members, they just didn't get Evil Dead. They couldn't understand what made it interesting or fun. So Koshi had to put things in perspective. It was kind of like this. It's a classic film that Sam Raimi made on a low budget. Think about that. Be Sam Raimi. So we managed to set the mood and the mindset of the team. Now it was time to create. Internally, we decided to go with our new engine. Ultimately, what became to be known as the RE engine. But it wasn't ready yet. So we started building our gray box in Unity. Here are some samples for you guys to take a look at. We didn't really care too much about making things cohesive or organized. We just wanted to see our ideas come to life during the look dev process. So when building out the gray box, we had a few basic mantras. No lengthy docs, any interesting idea was valid, and anyone and everyone should have the opportunity to realize their ideas. It was important that everyone consider the game as a whole. So we tried to remove any type of segregation or barriers and encouraged people to expand beyond their official roles. It didn't matter whether you were the audio director or the art director or whatever, you were free to discuss design. During pre-production, we employed agile development. We broke teams down into small groups. We wanted to make sure that goals were defined, and we created an environment where it really felt like a number of individual indie teams working amongst the larger team. We took things a step further, where we divided them into father, mother, brother, and grandma plus, meaning anything else outside of the grandma. Kind of all to strengthen teamwork and bonds. Because we didn't have a fleshed out story or scenario, we were able to create some interesting pieces that we actually used in the game. Unfortunately, this did not come without its drawbacks. Because we didn't have that, some things were left straying off course, confused. Some members didn't respond to this well. And in Koshi's words, sometimes it was just utter chaos. But as it says here, passion is important. And let me play you a clip of one of the things that was a result of what we did in pre-production.
It's fucking hard! Ah! Now, let's see how you feel.
The scene early on where you get your hand cut off was the result of our art director lamenting over the fact that there wasn't enough punch in the early scenes. So Koshi thought that we'd certainly make things interesting, but how would players come back from that? Then he remembered something that the author of the Death Note series said. Take your hero into a situation that even you can't figure a way out of, and work from there. So the team ran with it. The art director also had another idea. He wanted to have the character lose his lower half and start crawling his way towards one of the safe rooms. Yeah, we didn't use that one. So finally, we made it into full production. All right, we've got our engine, and we're ready to do this for real. Why did we make the engine in the first place? Well, since it was customized with the RE in mind, we of course needed to make enhancements in photogrammetry, but we also wanted it to push what we could do, not only technologically, but also make our teams be able to produce more in a more efficient way. This would make things easier for all of us. We couldn't continue doing things in full production in the same way we did in pre-production. So we made a few key changes. Reviews would happen early and before we implemented ideas. We moved to a waterfall system and carefully thought about how we would incorporate the good ideas that were born out of pre-production, like what I just mentioned. The overall dev process worked something more traditional, like build, review, revise, iterate, rinse and repeat kind of stuff. So Takeuchi-san's back, this time with some ominous yet encouraging words. He wanted Koshi and the team to really push things and make something special. Except there's one other thing that he really, really wanted them to do. Not delay the game. So ship dates would not change. Sorry. With that, we started to change things up and try to make things interesting. We wanted to actually bring things forward even more. So what could we do? One of the ideas was the split paths with Zoe and Mia. Keeping with the scope of less is more, and our fast approaching deadlines, we wanted to have something that made players feel like they were making a critical decision, but also something that wouldn't be so involved that it would delay the project. We settled on having the decision affect part of the story, even though the outcomes led the player into more or less the same direction. The chainsaw battle with Jack was another example of a design decision that would be a challenge, but also something that left a strong impression. Knowing our limitations helped the team to get more creative in their approach. We kept things positive and set our sights on the goal. So, Koshi felt the need to sometimes ignore common ideologies with regards to level design. Take the Jack character, for example. In traditional design, you would have a learning curve, carefully teaching players how to use weapons. Though with our Jack battle, players are given a chainsaw and expected to fight immediately. In another battle, you have a knife and a gun, and both are fairly ineffective against him. So your last resort is to get in a car and try something there. Jack himself, both physically and gameplay-wise, transforms, and the only consistent piece is that he's still just batshit crazy. Getting this to work was a very arduous process, and Koshi is indebted to the team for doing their best to work against the conventional wisdom. So, were the devs scared? Yeah, we were scared at first. And then we got numb to it. And then worried. And then we tried changing stuff because we thought it wasn't good. And then we got stress and more stress. So what was important was to do constant user testing. We had to make sure that it was objective. We needed to know that things were scary, and we were starting to get numb to it, so it was important to get an extra set of eyes. See, these are some of the other things that we looked at with user testing. It was important to keep the balance between that sense of anxiety and fear and also the sense of calm. You didn't want too much of one or too much of the other. Also the periods of stress. You didn't want the player constantly stressed, but you also wanted him to feel that sense of fear. And of course, balancing the timing of procuring items or ammo or guns, that needed to be all balanced out so you didn't have too much and it was too easy, or too little and making it too hard. And very, very important as well was motivating the player to make them feel like they were achieving certain goals and moving forward. But after all of that, what's the most important thing, or at least in terms of what we think is the most important thing? Having fun while creating. I know it sounds cheesy, but it's true. And yeah, it's important that we laugh a lot. Right now, the team is back at home, hard at work, working on some extra DLC, and trying to implement new ideas into that as well. We want them to stay as creative as possible and try new and different, interesting ideas. Next thing we have coming up does use a legacy character. Well, hopefully we can turn it into something that the fans will enjoy. Oh, and for those of you that didn't raise your hands at the beginning of this is a very important map. You'll notice it's got a GameStop on it and our location. It's about a 7-minute walk. I don't know what I'm saying right now, but the map is important if you didn't play yet. And right before we get back to Koshi, we'd like to present you with a parody video that we used during our launch party. This was to really get the devs amped and feel good about what they had done over the years. And it's a parody of a Japanese documentary type program. So it's about 5-6 minutes, so please bear with us while we go through it, but just keep that in mind.
大阪内平野、ここにカプコンの社運をかけたプロジェクトに取り組むチームがいた。チーム原渡。これはその苦難に満ちた開発の記録である。 指したのはこびりつく恐怖。実現のため試作では試行錯誤が繰り返された。試作環境にはユニティが採用された。物語の導入として考えられたタクシー車内のシーン。15分にわたって運転手と雑談する壮大な構想は当然ボツになった。メガネの男は後にジャックとなった。
おいおい、あんた、おい、どうしたんだこんなところで。
頼む、助けてくれ。
どうした。
表現者として時には自ら体を張った。幻のチャプター2。畑を歩くだけという挑戦的な構想はやっぱりボツになった。リーチ・ザ・ムーン。ついに新エンジンがロールアウトされた。その名も RE エンジン。劇的なシステム変更、アイソレートビュー、PSVR 対応、すべては恐怖のために。本当にこの路線で大丈夫なのか。不安と戦いながらスクラップ&ビルドを繰り返し、スタッフたちは信じた道を突き進んだ。そして迎えた2016年6月、アメリカ・ロサンゼルス。そこには歓声に沸くオーディエンスの姿があった。いける。手応えを感じた後は走り切るだけだった。発売当日の朝、梅田ヨドバシカメラ。
So in closing, I'd like to leave you with a few words from Koshi himself. This time we will have translation.
じゃあすみません、ちょっとここからは日本語で失礼します。はい、無事にリリースを終えた今日お話ししたようなプロジェクトが目指したビジョンは無事達成できたと僕らは考えています。
So, as all of you have hopefully played, and if not, like Pete said, please go to GameStop and pick up a copy. But
Thank you.
we have,
Thank you, Kyoko.
We have successfully launched or shipped our title, and as you just heard, and with confidence, I can say that we have achieved our vision.
やっぱりセブンを出す前と後ではフランチャイズに対する世間の見え方を変えることができたと思いますし、何より、次の展開への期待感をより高めることができたと思っています。
So, if I could say there's a period before Resident Evil 7, and now that we've released, after, and the future, if I look into the future, I think that we're able to change the perception or franchise and brand sort of image, and we can now take this and carry it into, and hopefully carry it over into whatever comes next for the franchise.
やはり開発を振り返ってみてこの成功のポイントとなったのは、シンプルなビジョンと、それに、チームが親筆に取り込んだこと、あとやっぱりパッションだと思います。
And what's important is to have a very simple vision. Not only that, but to be very faithful to your commitment, the team's commitment, and also the team's passion.
改めてすべての関係者とすべてのファンに感謝したいと思います。
And with that, I'd like to really thank not only all of you here today, but everyone who has already been exposed to, played, picked up, played the game, and to all of our partners who supported us along the way.
僕自身も今は高い充足感を感じています。
As for myself, as the person who led the project and as a developer, I have a great sense of satisfaction in what we were able to achieve.
ビデオではね、なかなか楽しそうにやってましたけども実際は皆さんもご存知のように、長い開発の中には難しい時期や苦しいことも本当に多いです。
As you just saw in the video, but it is a parody. Please keep in mind, it's not all fun times with happy faces and smiles all around. I'm sure you guys have experienced similar things, going through very tough times and challenges.
はい、でもその長い苦しい時期を乗り越えて、得られる充足感は、他では変えられない、変え難いものじゃないかと思っています。
But I hope you do agree that when you overcome those tough times, challenges with your team, and to have this kind of result or to make it to your goal, it is all worth it.
ちょうどね、そういう長い苦しみを乗り越えて充足感を得られるっていうのは、もうまさにバイオハザードのようじゃないかなと思ってます。
And that feeling of overcoming these tough times and challenges, and times when you don't think you can make it to the goal, is very similar to what you experience in the game itself.
本日はご清聴ありがとうございました。
Thank you for listening. Can I get the mic on? So we have about 20 minutes, and we'll open it up to Q&A. We have two mics, one on each aisle. So if you could come up and ask the question into the mic. Is it on? Testing. Oh, it's
Here
on.
we go. Hi. My name is Doru. I'm from Paradox Interactive over in Sweden. Thank you so much for the presentation. I really love the game. Just a question. I know you're in no position to share, any numbers or any of the not so sexy budget stuff. But I am curious, assuming the return on investment for a project such as this one is better than for a very, very large project such as Resident Evil 6, what does that mean not only for this franchise, but for maybe all of Capcom's franchises going forward?
そ
数字は具体的な数字は公表できないかもしれないですけども、
答えづらい。
比較すると、多分このプロジェクターは相当投資数額に対する返ってくる時間っていうのは大きかったと思うんですね。それは今後の例えば次自作を作るにあたってそれは考え方とか戦略的なことが変わったりするんですか。じゃあマイクに。はい。
マイクでね。そうですね、おっしゃる通り具体的な金額を言う立場ではありませんのでただ今回のプロジェクトは、説明したようにエンジンも含めたプロジェクトなんですよね。だから単純な比較はやはりできないんですけども、おそらく開発の部分においては確かに、6よりはコンパクトには作ってます。で、今後についてなんですけども、やはりそのエンジンを作り終えたってことで次に関してはその分を抜いてより、ゲームの中身に集中できるので、もっとより良いものが作れるのかなとは思ってます。
So you're right. I am unable to share any numbers or figures here. However, one thing to keep in mind for RE7 is that sort of inclusive of the engine development cost is what we're looking at. And so it's hard to compare. It's like comparing apples and oranges. So it's hard to say. But the development cost, you're right, it was a lot more sort of compact in the sense of if you compare it just purely numbers, 7 versus 6.
I can add to that. I mean, as I said in the presentation as well, I mean, we tried to be as efficient as possible. So we tried to keep things within the budget that we were given.
Here's your answer.
Thank you.
Hi, I just have one quick question and one a little longer question. But the first one is, was Texas Chainsaw Massacre an influence at all? Because I see quite a bit of that in the early parts of the game anyway.
今日説明したように今日説明したように実は一番最初の、モチーフはイービルデッドなんですよね。ただ、ゲームの中にいろんな要素があるのでおっしゃる通りもちろんテキサスチェーンソーは僕らも大好きなタイトルですし他にもいろいろと、参考にしているものはあります。
So first and foremost, you saw on the slide too, but I guess if we were to call out like the main vision or motif goal that we went for is Evil Dead, but that doesn't mean that that was the only reference material that we went by. So obviously Texas Chainsaw Massacre and everything else that you can really think of, there's a whole sort of wide variety of elements that we pulled inspiration and influence from. We're huge fans, period. So there's a lot of influences.
はい、で食事会のシーンなんですけど実はチームに見せたリファレンスのビデオは、テキサスチェーンソーではなくてロングターンの食事シーンなんですよ。じゃあホラー映画はテキサスチェーンソーの、最初としていろんな映画でああいった怪人たちの食事シーンっていうのはたくさんあって僕らはその古今東西の食事ビデオをたくさん集めて、バイオハザードにふさわしいのはどれかなっていう考え方で選びました。
So to add to that, that whole table dining scene, the first video or the first scene that I showed and shared with my friend, my team, is from Long Turn, and we referenced a lot of very similar scenes from a wide variety of film and probably non-film references. And it doesn't have to be anything that's from modern days, everything, old, new, from east and west. But the very first scene that we showed to the team was from that.
Yeah, it was really the table scene that made me think of it. But sorry, the real question I wanted to ask was, so I didn't mean for that to be such a thing. But I was just curious, was VR always part of the plan? And if not, because I know you made a comment about you just had to keep the schedule and didn't want to ship late. So I was just wondering if VR was in the plan early, and if it wasn't, how did you manage to get that in without the schedule changing?
言いますね。はい。それもよく聞かれる質問ですね。今日説明したのに最初に竹内から僕は話を聞いたのを受けて僕はだったらすごく VR が合うっていうので最初の GDD には入れてました。ただ実際に開発を始めたのは、割と本制作始まってもうちょっと経ってからです。
So yeah, when we got the kind of the mandate from Takeuchi, I thought in an instant, like, okay, this is meant for VR. It would be the perfect fit. But in reality, when we started really working on VR, it wasn't until a little bit into the development period.
Yeah, in the original design doc, he had included VR as well,
That's right.
but it wasn't necessary. We didn't actually start building it out immediately.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I know.
I see, sorry, I do see people lined up on this side too, so let's take one from that side.
Okay, first off, I'd like to say that I really enjoyed this game. It was really nice to play a Resident Evil game again that really encapsulated the horror that the genre and game series has been trying to keep alive. And you mentioned how like they kind of progress into like a sequential order, like 1 through 3 is the third person, and then 4 through 6 is more action-oriented. Are you planning on going with that approach with Resident Evil from this point on as well? Or like, is there going to be 8 and 9 following 7's approach, or are you up in the air about that right now?
Good question.
はい、7を作る前の段階ではおっしゃる通りです。ただまあ、サバイバルホラーにはやっぱり謎と驚きが大事なので、次がどうなるかはお楽しみください。
素晴らしい回答です。
So yeah, it was in the slide, and prior to 7, we can sort of group them into 3s. However, with this genre of survival horror, mystery and suspense is key, which means who knows what's going to happen. Okay.
Okay, I have 2 questions. One is for the VR mode. They use a sort of locomotion which is continuous locomotion, and up to now many games that used this type of locomotion, people got sick. So did you try out also other types of locomotion with teleports and so on? And when was it that you were safe that this type of locomotion didn't make people sick?
プレイヤーとして行動を移動ですね、取るのに、例えばテレポートとか他のやり方で、例えばプレイヤーをこう移動させるっていうのではなくて、こうそのまま歩いていくっていうのが、それをもちろん運用を避けなきゃいけないじゃないですか。それをうまくこなされてると思うんですけども、いろんな他のやり方も精査した上で、VR のその行動での利用はしないという自信があったので、そのままやり遂げられたんでしょうか。
はい、そうですね、まあ、ご存知の方いらっしゃるかもしれないですけど、最初に、世間に VR の実際にプレイできるものを出したのが去年の E3 なんですよね。だからそこでは僕ら実は結構自信があったんですけども、割とモーションシックになるっていうネガティブなフィードバックもあったんですよ。でそこからソニーさんにもすごくもっとやらなければいかんと言われたのもあってですね、でも僕らとしてもやっぱりね、発売までに向けてものすごくそこからいろんなことを試して、実際に社内のスタッフをもう何十人もテストプレイに使って、皆さんに本当に申し訳なかったんですけどねテストなんでやっぱ酔っちゃう人も結構いたんですけど、でそれでいろんなパターンを試して、かなり抑えることができたんですよね。そういうところで今の、仕様でいけると合意しました。
So the very first time we showed off VR mode in semi-public trade was last year's E3, and we came in with a good amount of confidence to E3, but the result was that we did hear a lot of people who said that they got sick, and so we did have some negative feedback. And so really, it was only after post E3 that we really started looking into how we can improve and make it better. We also got advice, a very important and valuable advice from the Sony team, and worked very hard. They encouraged us to do better, and that we can do better. So, and then prior to sort of mastering up our pre-release, we did a lot of user testing within the company. Several of our staff and personnel had tested the game too, and I feel bad because I know that some people really got sick. It is a test, So a lot of people probably were in for a little bit of a surprise. But that's when we started tweaking and fine-tuning and a lot of trial and error and really got to find the right kind of zone where we landed.
And second question is, you said part 7 would be more suspenseful and scary, and the first half of the game really is. But the second half is more action-oriented. The final is very much gunfights and so on. Was that a compromise to don't set off the fans so much, or was it planned? And would you do it otherwise, taking it the scary way and the slow way all the way to the end the next time?
Right. それは結果としては僕らも今振り返って、議論の余地はあるなと思ってるんですけども、レベルデザインの意図としては後半はいろいろな謎が分かってきて、さらにプレイヤーも強くなって、最初に苦労した敵を割と、倒していってゴールに向かうと、そういう、エスカレーションというのをやりたくて今のレベルデザインにしています。
So it's fair to say that even ourselves now post-release we can perhaps view it in that manner too. So I don't disagree with that. However, from a level design perspective, the aim that we had there was that, in the first half of the game, you're now solving mysteries. You're finding out more, right? And so towards the end of, or the latter half, is that now that you're stronger and you have a lot more of these mysteries solved and you've uncovered all this, that you can take an approach of maybe, trying to be in a position where you can go out and really defeat the characters, defeat the enemies. So that was really more the intent, that you uncover, but then towards the, as you progress in the game, that you would use that to your strength.
Thank you.
Hi. Actually, that was sort of my question, but now I made something up on the spot here. On one of the slides, you had some influences of what horror could be, like you showed Amnesia and Outlast. That kind of progression of horror games turned into a lot of more indie developers. I feel like there was a lot of influence from them. Was there any kind of reaching out or kind of just sharing or collaborating of ideas with those indie developers?
So そうですね。いや、そういったインディータイトルが多いので、僕らはもちろんプレイはしてるんですけども、なかなかね、日本にそういう開発者が多いわけではないんで、あまりそういった意見交換はできてないですね。
So you're right. We try to play as much as we can a lot of these indie developers, horror, survival action types of titles, but there are not a lot of those in Japan. A lot of the developers that make these games, they're not really physically located in Japan, so it's not as easy for us to have maybe some communication or meeting up with them and just having casual conversations. So we haven't had the opportunity to really do that.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for your wonderful presentation. I've been a big Resident Evil fan for a long time, so and I've been very receptive to the different directions that the series has gone in over the last 20 years. However, a lot of people who I respect would say things like, they really miss the action elements of Resident Evil 4 through 6, and I even had one person say that he'd rather RE7 didn't do so well, so you guys could go back to that more action-oriented direction. And Nakanishi-san, I want to know, what would you say to a person with that kind of mindset, and how do you get them to like the direction you took the game in.
そうですね。はい。今日のプレゼンテーションでも説明したと思うんですけども、やっぱり全てのファンを全員満足するのを作るのは難しいと僕ら考えてるんですよね。で、みんなたくさん遊んでもらってるんだったら分かると思うんですけど、バイオハザードシリーズはこれまでいろんなスピンオフとかすごく作ってるじゃないですか。なので、カプコンとしては今後そのアクションオリエンテッドなのを全く作りたくないと思ってるわけじゃなくて、あくまでプロジェクトのコンセプトをしっかり定めて、それに沿う形の選択と周知をしたものを作っていきます。だから単純に言うと、今後の展開にご期待ください。
Yeah, so there was one slide that we or Pete had shown. It says we can't fit this all in one package. And so the meaning behind that obviously is that, not all RE games are going to be 100% enjoyed by all RE fans at any time. And as you know, if you've been following the series, there's also, besides the numerical REs, we've had some spin-offs. And so we're not saying that Capcom or our RE team is not going back ever to action-oriented RE games. I think that the simple sort of vision and owning up and committing to that and keeping focus, keeping true to that is what we are trying to say here today for RE7. And I think you guys, can look forward to what we may come up with in the future.
Thank you.
Oh, okay, a little bit more. And we're out of time, so this is going to be the last.
僕はリベレーションズも作ってて、やっぱりああやってクリスとかジルを動かすのはすごく楽しかったんですよね。でもね、ちょっと考えてみてほしいんですけど、今回ね、例えばレオンを主人公にしてて、レオンが鍋を分けてゴキブリを払うシーンってそんなみんな見たくないと思うんですよね。
So I also worked on Revelations. So just to give you an example, it's not just the numerical titles that I worked on. So I enjoyed, basically kind of controlling and giving life to Chris and Jill for that. But in this, let's say if we had Leon and then he opens up the pot and there's cockroaches, that's not something that, I don't know if you guys would enjoy that as much. So, there's a certain focus that we just stick to, and that just happens to be what we did for RE7.
Can I ask one last question really quickly?
Okay.
I love the game, and I really liked your art director's idea that you could get sliced in two and then have to crawl to the safe room. Was there anything else that you rejected because it was too disgusting?
Right. あるんですけど、次使うかもしれないんで、すいません、言えないです。
Of course we do, but I can't give away all the secrets for our next game, so I won't say.
We might use it.
Thank you.
Thank you.